Hello, and welcome to part 4 of episode 15 of KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, and this series is to provide entertainment during our worldwide coronavirus nightmare by me reading you my short fiction. This week I've been serializing the Dragon Precinct story, When the Magick Goes Away, which was Danthres and Torin's first case. It's a flashback to 10 years prior to the main action of the Precinct series of novels that I've done, novels and short stories. These are fantasy police procedurals, kind of Law & Order meets Lord of the Rings. I've been writing them since 2004, starting with Dragon Precinct, and there have been 4 novels since, as well as the short story collection Tales from Dragon Precinct, which has this story of how the 2 main characters first met and first started working together. First 3 are already up, and here is part 4 of When the Magick Goes Away. Jan. Jan had been sitting in the interview room for what seemed like hours. He couldn't hear the time chimes in here, and there were no windows, so he had no idea how long it had really been. All he'd said was that he was the manager of both stores. Then they took him to Finnert's store, and then they had the guards who were watching Finnert's take him back to the castle under arrest. That wouldn't have been so bad, but then they put him in this damn room. The only illumination came from a lantern, providing insufficient light, a table, 3 stools, and a door, which remained open just a crack. Jan could hear voices and footfalls, though none of the former were distinct enough to make out actual words. He dabbed the sweat that was beading off his high forehead. When those 2 lieutenants came in here, he was going to give them a piece of his mind. You could bet the house on that. He'd been rehearsing the harangue he would give those 2 in his head for the last however bloody long he'd been in here, and once they showed up, and then, finally, the pair of them came in, their cloaks swirling imperiously behind them as they walked through the door. Opening his mouth and holding up a finger, Jan promptly forgot what he was going to say to the 2 of them. "Our apologies," said the male detective, while Jan sat there stupidly with his mouth open. "But we needed to check on some things before we could speak to you."
"Check on what things?"
Jan's voice came out as a croak. He'd been hoping to come across as aggrieved, and instead it sounded like he'd just woken up. The ugly female detective said, "We needed to confirm a few things with the records office in the castle's other wing, and speak to some people."
"What people?"
Jan really hoped they didn't talk to his wife. Unfortunately, the woman didn't answer the question. "Imagine our surprise to learn that you were the one who inherited ownership of both shops." Jan swallowed.
"Yeah, I know that. You could have just asked me."
"Really?" The woman sounded amazed. "You would have volunteered information that gives you an excellent reason to have killed Court and Finnert?"
"Are you nuts? Why would I want to kill those 2?
The man smiled, showing teeth so nice Jan thought he might be a wizard. "I believe Lieutenant Tresyllione just explained that." "You see," the woman, Tresyllione, said, "you've gone from being the manager of 1 shop to the manager of 2 shops to the owner of 2 shops. In my experience, the owner makes more money than the manager." Jan shook his head.
"Yeah, well, there's some shit that money can't buy. I'm already looking to sell."
Tresyllione blinked. "What?" "Which shop are you selling?" the red-haired man asked.
"Both."
Jan shuddered.
"I've only been at this a day, and I already can't take the nonsense from the damn Brotherhood. They got rules, they got regulation, and for Zint's sake have they got paperwork. I can barely write in common, and they're asking me to fill out all these scrolls with requests and permissions and work orders. I just can't take it. Worst thing that ever happened to me was those mages getting killed."
The man shook his head. "Seems I was wrong about him." After staring daggers at her partner for some reason, Tresyllione turned to Jan. "Who are you selling to?"
"I ain't sold it yet."
He said with a sigh.
"If you know anybody who wants to buy a shop or 2, send them my way, will you? There's only 3 stores selling those new bags of holding, and I own 2 of them."
"You know, it's easy for you to say that you wish to sell the stores," Tresyllione said, "but it's been my experience that murderers lie. Besides, we also spoke to your wife." Jan winced. Tresyllione continued. "She told us that you weren't home when the murders took place, and..." The other detective interrupted. "The murders were also committed..." Then he realized what he'd done. "My apologies, Lieutenant. Please, go ahead." As Lieutenant Ben Wyvald began to say, Tresyllione said, sounding a bit exasperated, the murders were committed in the shops when they were closed by someone whom the victims knew and trusted. That perfectly describes you, doesn't it? The man, Ben Wyvald, said. After giving another look to her partner, Tresyllione said, I'm afraid we'll need to know where you were when the two wizards were killed. Jan started fidgeting on the table. He really was hoping to avoid this. But he couldn't get arrested for murder. That would get him hanged.
Talk to Suzette,
he said with a heavy sigh.
She runs a place on Sandy Brook Way. I've been there pretty much every night the last month.
He leaned back in his chair.
Mina's gonna kill me.
Ben Wyvald said, Mina would be your wife?
Yeah.
Jan frowned.
Hey, wait, you said you talked to her.
Tresyllione grabbed Ben Wyvald by the arm and led him out of the room, muttering, Next time keep your damn mouth shut! Putting his head in his hands, Jan muttered to himself. Mina was definitely going to kill him. Still, better that than a death sentence. Though not by much. Benin. Benin stared at the body of his old friend, J.V. Marta. In his life, Benin had only seen 2 dead wizards before today, and both of them died in their beds. Seeing J.V. laying in front of his magic shop on Maple Path was the most repugnant sight he'd ever seen. His throat cut open, dry blood caked on the wound, and his body just lying there. He looked up at the guard from Unicorn Precinct, who'd responded initially to the call for help. Have you ever noticed, young man, that the major difference between a dead body and a living one? The guard frowned, clearly confused. One's dead and one's alive? Benin sighed. Dead bodies don't move at all. Living bodies move in so many subtle ways. The ironic part is that JV here is the one who showed me that. His father died a while back. His father wasn't a wizard like we were, so he only lived a normal lifespan. He shook his head. The funny thing is, I was the only other wizard there. None of the others could be bothered. Not even the wizard JV was apprenticed to. Never understood that. In fact, he cut himself off when he heard voices coming down Maple Path. You shouldn't have interrupted me. My apologies, but I had no idea you were going to continue speaking. And that idiotic, and that's your wife? Question? I mean, I told you when we went in that we were going to lie about the wife. Actually, you said no such thing. I didn't? No, but I thought you had spoken to the wife while I was looking up the records. I don't believe... Ah, hello, said the man who had red hair. He and his companion, a hideous woman, who was obviously half-elf and half-human, both wore guard armor with brown cloaks. Benin had no idea what the cloak symbolized. I'm Lieutenant Danthres Tresyllione, the woman said. We're with the Cliff's End Castle Guard, and we're here to investigate the murder. After a sidelong glance at Tresyllione, the man said, I'm Lieutenant Torin Ben Wyvald. You found the body? Yes. My name is Benin. That's J.V. Marta, and he and I were friends. We were meeting for lunch. You're also a wizard? Ben Wyvald asked. Benin nodded. I didn't realize the Castle Guard had investigators, or that the Brotherhood would permit you to be involved. This is the 3rd murder of a wizard in the last few days, Ben Wyvald said. Hadn't you heard? Tresyllione asked, sounding suspicious. Shaking his head, Benin said, I've been vacationing in... Well, it's hard to explain exactly, but suffice it to say, I have not been anywhere nearby for the past month. I only came back to Barlin this morning and used a teleport spell to meet up with JV here in Cliff's End. He snorted. He mentioned that he had some gossip about 2 other wizards who also apprenticed with the same... He trailed off as something horrible occurred to him. Tell me, were the other 2 deaths Finnert and Tam Court? Tresyllione frowned. You know them. Only by name. JV, Finnert, and Court all apprenticed with Mike Doherty about 50 years ago. That got the 2 cloaked guards to exchange surprised glances. Tresyllione then looked at Benin. You're saying that all 3 of the victims apprenticed with the local representative of the Brotherhood? Benin made a face. When did they appoint that idiot to be the local representative? He shook his head. Never mind. Nothing those imbeciles do surprises me anymore. In any case, lieutenants, I wish I could be of more service, but I attempted to cast a spell known as inanimate residue on the vicinity. Nodding, Ben Wyvald said, We're familiar with the spell, yes. In fact, Court cast one for us on an earlier case. Tresyllione glared at Ben Wyvald. It wasn't for us. You weren't... Never mind. In any event, Benin said quickly, not knowing nor caring what burr got in this pair's armor, the spell was inconclusive, which means that some form of magic was involved. Tresyllione stared at Benin. So does that mean a wizard killed him? That's insane. It's not insane, Benin said sadly, though it's rare, especially these days. But no, that's not necessarily what happened. There are several types of magical creatures that can affect the spell adversely, as can some store-bought spells. All right, Tresyllione said, we need to look inside. Can you remain here in case we have more questions? Absolutely. I want to know who killed him. Benin stomped toward the door, wanting to be there when the lieutenants looked around. Inside, the shop looked pretty much the same as it did when Benin had last been here, which was when JV opened it. He'd rearranged things a bit, giving the potions more prominent shelf space near the desk, and having a door to the rear where there used to be beads. The two detectives went into the back room, while Benin studied the inventory. All the usual items, including those ridiculous love potions that people kept buying, even though they never worked the way the people buying them hoped they would. He heard the two lieutenants muttering about blood through the door. Ignoring them, he looked around for the display for the bags of holding. Frowning, he didn't see them. Muttering a quick incantation, he cast a search spell to find the bags. The spell revealed no such item anywhere inside the store, not even in the storage area. "Lieutenants!" he cried out. The two detectives poked their heads out from the back room. "What is it?" Tresyllione asked. "The bags of holding aren't here." They exchanged a look and then walked in. "Bags of holding?" Ben Wyvald asked. They're bags that are a portal to another dimension. They enable one to store considerably more than the bag's external capacity. It's only limited by what will fit through the mouth of the bag. Tresyllione asked, "And JV sold these?" "The entire reason he and I were having lunch today was so we could show off the bags of holding. The magic required to make them work is incredibly difficult. JV was very proud that they'd finally found a way to make it work." "Who's they in this context?" Ben Wyvald asked. "No idea." Benin shrugged. "JV just said he was working with other wizards on it. I didn't really care all that much, so I didn't ask. But he said they went on display last week." He opened his arms wide as if to take in the entire shop. "So where are they?" To be continued. Tomorrow will be the conclusion of Where the Magic Goes Away here on KRAD COVID Readings. Please subscribe to the channel so you can be alerted when that and all the other readings go live. Check me out online at DeCandido.net, my blog at DeCandido.wordpress.com. Check me out on Patreon and try and throw some support at me, please. Patreon.com/KRAD. And please, please stay safe. See you tomorrow.